um, to the streams project. So we have been working pretty hard since the December meeting. We took back some stuff from that meeting that we're going to go over today, and we're going to go over all of our revised capital and OEM charges and estimates, our revised rate structure, which is probably what everyone is going to have questions about. So we'll spend, I would say, a majority of our time on the rate structure and how that's going to impact all of our cities. I will just say this, the old rate structure that you guys saw in the past, we threw that out with the backwater, and we really started from ground zero about 4 months ago to get a better rate structure for everyone. We also heard it from our industrial partners that they really did not like how the rate structure was impacting their business. So we worked really, really hard to make a rate structure that made sense for municipalities, the industries, and eventually the actual wastewater district. Then we're going to talk about the project priority list. If you have not heard from your city administrator, we did submit our PPL. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to talk with Uma and the rest of the folks about the next steps in the schedule, and then the financial commitments and investments that we're going to have to make for that next step. And then we'll have open discussion throughout. There's going to be spots where I just pause just to make sure that if anyone has questions, they can certainly ask. No, it can't be on this side of the thing. Did I turn it off? Nope, 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 okay. Nope. So the three main comments that we got back from our December meeting, and I apologize, the stapler and the machine that we use stapled them backwards. And I don't know. I also couldn't figure out me and the printer had some work today. Municipal stakeholders, future rates. What we heard back from the cities is they were way too high and that was not affordable. HCP just did not make business sense to go forward because the rates for not only the water coming back to them didn't make sense on a capital investment perspective. What they were looking at is, hey, if we're going to invest in a wastewater facility that does retreatment for us, that water coming back to us has to make sense in a price point. And then the other thing that we got feedback from was from DFA, just saying that the capital costs in the beginning were just way too high for them to really buy into the project. So we took a few things back from that meeting, and Kurt and Al and Uma, you can interrupt me at any time. So we took things back from that meeting, and we looked at some of the main accounts. Number one, how much the capital reserve was that we had estimated, the percentage was probably too high. The loan amount that we would be getting for the bond rate was also probably way too high. And so we started looking at these things and thinking, how can we reduce that so that the overall project is more realistic in our estimates? So through this process, as you guys remember in December, we did this feasibility study saying, is this feasible? Is it physically feasible? Could we make this work for all 4 towns? And the end of that answer was yes. If this is a feasible project, we can convey wastewater from the 4 towns to 1 plant and make it work. But the bigger question was, how do we make it work and make it financially responsible for the public? So we did reduce the reserve amount from 10% to 3%, which was a large chunk of change. I can't remember how many millions that took off, but enough. And then we reduced the amount based on MPCA and some of our partners in rural development, saying that your 3.2% for your loan amount is going to be much higher than it actually is, than reality. So as all of you know, our municipal bonds are much cheaper than our prime rates. So we put that down to a 1.5% interest rate. The DFA treatment and pre-treatment. So during these conversations with the industrial partners, there were certain aspects that they said they still wanted to control because it would reduce the amount of capital costs to the actual wastewater facility. So DFA chose to continue to pre-treat their water before they sent it to us. So it's kind of like a pre-soak in your washer, right? You're gonna pre-soak the clothing before you put it to the wash cycle. That's what DFA is gonna do to the wastewater before it comes to the wastewater facility, which reduced the capital that we needed on the project by almost 10 million. See, I do pay attention to money sometimes. So that was a significant amount, right there that they are taking on. They will maintain it. It is not part of the wastewater district. HCP water reuse with lime softening. So our original plan was to take the water that was in the wastewater facility and to reuse it, we were going to use RO, right? Reverse osmosis. And we looked into it and there is an option to do lime softening that would get it to the water clarity that HCP would need in order to make ethanol or whatever byproduct they wish. Then we also adjusted the loan/grant amount, and I'm gonna pause here really quick. We still don't know what that's gonna look like. But I will tell you that on similar projects, this is the formula that most of them got. There's also an affordability calculator that we won't know until later on in the project, whether or not we will get it, but basically it's a buy down from another program that comes to the cities in the form of a grant. So let's pretend that the rates quadruple and your town or city cannot afford. What they do is they buy down the first 20% of that cost to help lower the rates for the residents and industries, whoever uses the facility. So the 70-30 loan/grant is going to be really close to it, but it actually might be a little bit different in the end. We might actually get more grant money just based on the affordability calculator. And they do that so that, what did he say? We don't buy gold washers and gold doorknobs. So they don't buy it all down, but they'll buy that first 20% to get it into a more affordable rate. So, nope, that was right. So activities since the last meeting. So we revised those capital and M cost and estimates. We revised the rate structure. We had a very in-depth conversation with MPCA. I think it was a 2.5-hour call between myself, Uma, Al, and Kurt. And it was really all about this journey that we're all on together. You didn't know this, but it's like a trip on the Titanic. It's going to take a while to get across the ocean. Those conversations with the MPCA were great. They were eye-opening. They gave us some additional resources, and then they actually set up another meeting with us so that we can talk through what the next steps look like. The meeting focused a lot on the PPL. So we're going to go over that in a second. We also had really good conversations with HCP and DFA, and I'll be honest, that's the only reason we're having this conversation tonight. Before we went back to the cities, we had to make sure that the industrial partners understood what their role was going to be with our revised rate structure, because if they weren't in, then we would have had to start all over again. So we had these conversations with our industry partners and the significant users of water prior to this, before we got to this meeting, so that we don't have to go back and do this all over again, because the third time, not always the charm. And then we also submitted our PPL applications. So the PPL applications between the 4 cities were all individual applications that Kimley Horn submitted for us. Well, we submitted them, but they prepared them for us. And each town submitted their own. And the reason that the MPCA had us do that is because each town will be rated separately. And so, which is great because all the towns have different needs. Lafayette's needs are not the same as New Offarin's needs. So we will get those scores back at the end of this month on all 4 towns. That then will impact the affordability calculator, because each town is rated differently. So that's why there's that really unknown number, because that will help us determine what that's gonna look like down the road. I'm gonna pause. Any questions about what we did so far?
I think it needs to be said that the PPL applications that were submitted on behalf of all four communities were for the conveyance systems for Gibbon, Lafayette, and New Albert to get the wastewater to the central point. And then on the Winthrop one, no excess financial responsibility, but that one included the wastewater facility also, because there was a locale or a zip code where the wastewater facility would more than likely be located.
Yeah, that's good to point out.
And then I think the other thing on the previous slide, when we talked about, I guess, yeah, we've reduced the reserve account. If you remember at that one meeting, we said that everything that we kind of presented was really the, I don't want to say top of the line or Cadillac, but for lack of better terms.
Yeah.
And that's why we went and we started reducing the numbers. We don't think we reduced them too much because we didn't want to lowball it and have to come back year 2, year 3, year 4 into operation and ask for more money. We think that we're hoping that the 70% loan and 30% grant, we're talking to the MPCA, is a real optimistic one, especially when we were going through the PPL applications. They kept bringing up regionalization. You get extra points for regionalization. You get extra points for regionalization. I think that's going to be a benefit.
Yeah. Buma, anything?
No, you're doing great.
Once in a while. So this is the overall cost. So I'm gonna pause to say before we show you this slide, does anyone remember the first number that we gave you? No? Yeah, do you remember?
151?
Yeah, it was 153, 151. We bounced around a little. So we've reduced the overall costs by almost $40-ish million. That was from reducing the interest rates. It was reducing the capital costs, the reserve account. So our treatment facility, the actual treatment of the wastewater, it's going to cost about $18 million. And that's between all 4 cities. Conveyance, which obviously we've known for a while, it's just going to be really expensive. Mile per mile, it costs about $1 million per mile to get the wastewater from the city to the wastewater facility. And then obviously someone's got to construct the thing. There's only 2 companies that construct wastewater facilities?
Yeah, in Minnesota, it's very competitive. Rice Lake and Griddle.
Yeah.
A couple of big ones that can do something like this.
Yeah. So construction costs obviously will be about 34 million. Total capital costs, that means that just the facility itself is about $90 million. And engineering and administration is about 14 million. So your grand total is 103. So if you look at the bottom, someone could have cheated 145, 154. Those were our original numbers from October and December. So we've really narrowed it down and we've gotten really specific. And that is also without the reverse osmosis system, which did contribute to a lot of the capital. Our O&M costs, the operating costs, we also took another look at that. I still think that this is just our outlook right now. I think that this is still a little bit high, but we don't know what that operating cost is going to be like in the next 6 years. So labor will cost about $1 million a year between all the operators and billing clerk, insurer, all those things that we're going to need to operate the facility. Energy costs annually will cost about $800,000. Chemical use, $519. Maintenance and repairs, $519. Solids handling and disposal is $324, and then just a miscellaneous account of $25,000. So every year, just our O&M costs, not the capital, will be about 3.2 million.
It seems like a lot of money, but Over in Gaylord, Michael's Foods Industrial Wastewater Plant, their annual operating budget is in excess of $750,000 by that one facility by itself.
Hey, when you look at, the amount of dollars you put into 4 facilities with 4 operators and 4 billing clerks and administrators and all that stuff, honestly, it's not really out of the realm of the ballpark that we would. October 2024, just this last October, we did an estimate of our annual costs, and that was with DFA's high strength serum. So if you remember, our original was almost $10 million a year. You know, since they're not gonna give us their serum anymore, we got to take that out of the cost. So that's one of the significant reasons that it went down as much as it did. In December, we presented like a $7 million budget for operating. Again, without the DFA serum, it just really drops down significantly. Anything else on that, guys? These are, I think, the most important numbers, because when we get to the rates on the next slide, I'm doing this from memory, so I hope it's the next slide. Might be that Bobby might be the one after that. But our obligation as a district really is equal from our loan payments for the bond, and then the operating costs, and then a reserve account for when things break, right? So if we assume that we have a 1.5% interest rate on a 30-year loan, which I think is really solid. That's pretty accurate. This is 100% public entity, no industrial contributions, which we're gonna talk about when we get to rates. Industries pay monthly charges instead of capital buy-in, and it excludes any future debt obligations. Meaning if something happens where someone wants to jump on board, or we add something to the facility, maybe we do some aerators, to ponds or whatever that might be, that would not be included in this.
And by no industrial contribution, doesn't mean that they're not gonna be contributing. That means that this is gonna be a municipal wastewater plant, which is a big key in getting funding from the state and federal government. They don't loan, borrow, and grant money to private industry.
It was, when we spoke with the MPCA and even rural development, one of the key things that we took away is, they didn't say don't get rid of the industry's capital input, but they said get rid of the industrial capital input because it's not helping you. In fact, it would be really hard to get federal grants with them involved. So our annual obligation to operate the facility and pay the debt is $6 million. Our monthly obligation is $530,000. This is a really small, you guys are gonna get this in a big PDF format later on. I'll email it out. I'm gonna start this conversation out by the old rate structure. We had 4 entities plus 2 industrial partners, right? We had 4 cities and 2 industrial partners, and we had chunked off certain aspects of the project that belong to those certain entities. So, for instance, DFA was, they were gonna be in charge of the serum and how much it costs to build that. And Heartland Corn Products, hey, if you want the water, that's great, but you're gonna pay for the water reuse. You're gonna pay $9 million up front. DFA, you're gonna pay, no, it's opposite, whatever it was. 15 million. That is not in this formula anymore. We're not doing that. So I think Al and Kurt and I and Uma, after the December conversation, were like, we have to make a formula that makes sense to every single city, that every single city is paying the same amount. And the reason that makes more sense in general is because the old way was really hard to explain to residents. Number one, it was really hard to understand why New Auburn's rates and Winthrop's rates and Lafayette rates were all different. So what you're gonna have to internalize in your brain is that we took all of those $1 million and we spread it out between all the cities. So that all the cities are paying the same rate. I think further down the road, when we actually get the commission and the district formed, that will be very beneficial. One thing that we heard on a call today from MPCA, and Al, I'm still looking at that rate sheet because I don't understand it, is I think what they're talking about is that the different cities, different municipalities are paying different rate structures from each other. Not only I think is that confusing to convey to residents, like why is New Auburn getting a break and Winthrop's paying more now? Is that as we go down and they have to raise rates or lower rates, right? Everyone would move at the same exact way. So when when we form the district and everyone gets 2 representatives or 3 or whatever that looks like, those individuals are all going to hear from the same residents at the same structure rate, and it's far easier to explain. Not only that, but I think there's some intrinsic value to say, we're gonna spread the costs out as much as we can amongst the population. So that we're all viable to live in still, and that it takes that weight off of just New Auburn or just Lafayette. The old way was almost like, hey, New Auburn, you're gonna pay for all your conveyance and the pump station, and if anything ever happens, good luck. That is probably beneficial to maybe some cities right away, but down the road, when we need their water, because we're selling so much of it, and something breaks, the wastewater district is just gonna say, okay, we're gonna take from the reserve account that we have at 3%, and we're gonna go fix it. So, anybody else want to explain rates so I can take a breath?
I'll go ahead and explain. What we did was we determined on the top left, we needed a monthly payment of about $530,000 a month. So you see, it says 4 cities, there's 1,457 accounts in the 4 cities. And we could change that base rate in yellow, that $27. We could change that to $30. We could change it to $15. But at $27 for those 1,457 accounts, the district would recover $39,337 in flat base rates every month. That's not if we don't take in one single gallon. Everybody pays their base rate. The municipal portion, the 4 cities, in the 4th box, 1.4 million gallons. The 4 cities are going to contribute approximately underneath the, you can find it out, Michael, underneath the 1457.
I think I could draw on this thing.
Underneath here, 1,257,000 gallons is about how much the 4 communities are gonna contribute. And that's based on the 4 years worth of data that we collected from all 4 cities. That will generate over a period of 30 days, that will generate about 37,710 gallons a month. So combined between the 4 cities will generate about $491,859 a month. Then if we go over to Heartland Corn Products, we said, well, we can't consider them one account. Because that wouldn't be fair. Why should they be one account if I'm one account? So we had to figure out a formula to try to determine what their account value is. And what we did was we determined on the 1,457 accounts of the municipality, approximately how many gallons were used per account. And that gave us a multiplication number, which told us that Heartland Corn is equal to 119 municipal accounts on water usage. At $27 a month base rate, their base rate will be about $3,200 base rate a year. A month.
A month.
They're going to contribute about 103,000 gallons a month, a day. So we multiply that times a month, it comes down to a little over 3 million gallons. We go through a multiplication to get it down into billing units. Their average monthly water bill will be about $37,000, well, $40,000. And we did the same with Dairy Farmers of America, DFA. We created a value on how many account values they're worth. At $27 per account, it's about $4,100 base rate per month, per month. They're gonna use send us about 132,000 gallons a month. Multiplies out to about 3.96 million gallons per month. And then it goes down to billing units times $12 per thousand. Their our monthly bill will be about $51,651 a month. And I think the numbers said that we're gonna generate a little over 600,000 gallons a month at that. The only variations that go into those numbers is on a real dry month. We may not be bringing 1.4 million gallons into the facility. We might be bringing 1.2 or 1 million gallons. So then those months, we're gonna run a little bit short, but everybody knows that all the facilities got I&I. So on the higher months, this is where it's gonna be beneficial that everybody doesn't forget about their collection system and continues to try to tighten it up. Because the water that you send to the wastewater facility is the water that you will be billed on. So during the wet months, there might be 3 million gallons a day coming in there. Then your bill is gonna be up. So the difference between those high months and the low months, we're thinking is gonna average out. So basically, everybody knows what I've got all the numbers here from all the cities, what your base rate is per month. We're looking at about $27 base rate per month and about $12 per thousand. So if it was my wife and I, we'd be paying about $49 a month if we use 2,000 gallons of water a month. That's, anybody's got any questions on it, that's how we put it together. And we can, like I say, we can change the base rate to 20, we can put the commodity rate up to 15, and we didn't find that there was that much difference. If we raise the commodity rate up, then everybody's bill is gonna go up a little bit more because your commodity rate, your price per thousand gallons affects your bill a lot more than the base rate. And on the industries, it's the same thing. The gallons that they use, their bill will go up greater if we play with the commodity rate than the base rate.
Mhm.
Then I guess it needs to be said, besides these rates, some of the communities have some debt responsibility on their own. So, you know, you might have to add $1.20, $1.50, $2 per thousand to cover some existing debt that you might have in your community.
And when we spoke to MPCA, some of that debt obligation actually can get rolled into the rest of this loan. And that's kind of some of that affordability calculator that we don't know about yet. So if you have a debt obligation out there that was specific to sewer, it can actually get absorbed by the wastewater district. The other thing that we still, a while back in December, you may remember that we spoke about the ponds in some of the communities, and we're gonna keep them. I think it's still our intent that that would become a wastewater district pond. We were on a call today. I know I'm springing this on all of you, I'm sorry, but we were on a call today and they have some weird formula where like it's from the pumping station to the sewer, and so that city still has to have staff on to maintain their ponds. Well, that's just silly. I mean, the whole point of doing this is so that your cities don't have to deal with wastewater anymore. It would be a wastewater district problem, so there might be, at some point, we might actually have to, when we form the wastewater district, go back to the cities and say, okay, now sell your ponds to the wastewater district and the land and call it even, you know, so that you don't have to maintain them as a city.
Yeah, one way to control the capital construction costs on any one community is to control the conveyance system that pumps the water from Gibbon to Winthrop or Lafayette. If you have to size it for a worst case scenario, when you're in those I&I events, those heavy rain events, to capture all the water that's backing up in basements, that force main that's coming between the towns has got to be tremendously large, and the lift station's got to be large. It's a lot of money to put in the ground. Plus, then when you go back to normal flows, then you've got that oversized lift station, oversized pumps, oversized pipes laying in the ground. So one way that we can alleviate that is to keep the ponds or a portion of the ponds in the two communities and in Winthrop. And when the water gets up to a certain level, pumping over to the treatment facility in Winthrop, it'll divert over to the ponds. And then the lift station can keep up in the community. The rest of it will go into the ponds. As soon as the rain events stop and the water starts dropping down, then we can take water back out of the ponds and start pumping it back over to the facility. So instead of having flows that go up and down to the wastewater facility, they can be more flatline. And then the ponds in Winthrop would be the last line of defense to take in all the water from all the communities and buffer it out before the wastewater plant.
Have DFA and Heartland seen these numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I think they were to actually see a number to take back to their corporates. That it's gonna be $40,000 a month based on this flow. They were really happy to get those numbers
I'll tell you for
other
DFA,
than unknowns.
especially, just in electricity and water costs, they already spend almost half of that. Just on their wastewater facility.
Yeah, there were like $8,000-9,000 a month in electrical.
Yeah, $17,000 every quarter. That's a lot, and they desperately need a new facility.
And if they have to build a new facility, they're probably talking between $10 and $15 million minimum.
Up front, I mean, they have to find,
But they're gonna be treating some of their,
they're gonna pre-treat some of theirs.
with the current treatment plant, or
I think they still have to do some upgrades to it, some minor upgrades to their facility.
and there's nothing that obligates them to use this system, correct? I mean, if, you know, a big corporation, DFA, in a year or two would decide,
I think it's cost
close or something
prohibitive
like that.
that, I mean, yeah, that is a possibility. Corn Products and DFA could definitely close. And then we would have to find a combined, $100,000 to make that up.
I would think, and this was a question for the attorney, that there's gonna have to be some kind of, debt retirement assistance responsibility. Not that there's capital put into this facility and in 2 years they walk away.
Yeah,
They have to realize that there's some risk in being part of this project also. And with DFA, whatever treatment they elect to put in at their facility, there is still, and same with Heartland. The reason I'm not saying Heartland, because their water that they're sending to the city of Winthrop right now is pretty clean. We have to report it to the state, and over thousands of data points of lab testing over a year, there's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 violation numbers that aren't even affecting the Winthrop ponds. Where DFA has potential to have higher numbers, so there will be pre-treatment numbers put in place. And if they violate those pre-treatment numbers, then there's multiplication calculations that go in and it multiplies their rate out. And that's typical with any industrial pre-treatment agreement. Both Heartland Corn and DFA will be what they call an SIU, a significant industrial user. And by the state of Minnesota, MPCA, they will be required to have a pre-treatment agreement in place with this facility. Right now, Heartland has one in place with Winthrop. And there's certain
Because they
numbers
said
that they
that
have to meet there, and then if those numbers aren't met, then there's violation multiplications put into the billing. So it's to their benefit to pre-treat the water and keep it under normal domestic waste strengths. If not, they have to pay extra. And that's, like I say, that's typical in with the industry.
And it's pretty significant too. It's not like, oh, it's pretty significant.
so does the water district build the cities, then the cities build that out to each resident?
Yeah, we haven't decided that, but yes, that's eventually how it would be. I always went through people. Ooh. First buying beers.
First dollar into the project.
So I look at it, Kelly, as MMPA, like MMPA bills us for the electric that we use, and then we bill the
Right.
customers. It'd be the same exact thing. So we actually tested our tower that we have for all of our water meters. They can reach all these towns. So if we used, our system or the wastewater facility wanted to use the tower, it could beam in 10 seconds how much water is coming through. In fact, it can even tell you an alert saying, man, I don't know what's going on in Gibbon, but something's wrong. Because their water is double what it normally is.
Would they have to have all of those, meters?
Nope, just on the conveyance system,
Okay.
just on where the
Yeah.
pump station brings it to us. The cities themselves can use whatever meter system they want. But just like we at Winthrop with our electric go, okay, what was our wholesale power? All right, well, this is the rate that we're having to adjust it to. You know, we do that once a year. Technically, what we can do, and we don't do this because it's Arlington and us kind of have that same philosophy. It is much easier to budget in a household than going up and down, up and down, up and down every single month. We set it for the average of what it was last year for power to make sure that we're covering the wholesale costs plus our reserve account. And I would assume that the cities would do the same thing. You know, these are the suggested rates from the district to the cities. This will cover your costs. When we bill you, this is what would cover the costs for the debt obligation.
The other question I had, the reserve account went from 10% to 3%. What is that reserve for?
Things that break, capital improvements, you know, generator goes out, filters go out. Yeah,
Okay, so it's for the
replacements.
plant that's not,
Pumps and piping and valves, every piece of equipment, electrical has a different life cycle. It might be a 3-year life cycle or a 5-year or a 10-year or a 15-year life cycle. That doesn't mean that if it's got a 5-year life cycle that you're gonna replace it, but there has to be adequate money in the reserve account, so when that piece of equipment does reach its life cycle, that it can be taken care of.
and that was my understanding that, is it different now with, not using reverse osmosis with this,
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
other medium? I
Yeah.
thought that was quite an expense every.
It was pretty expensive and it's harder to replace and that's really why we could back off the reserve account quite a bit.
Yeah, reverse osmosis is very energy intensive and it's very chemical intensive. There's like, oh, I'm thinking of Clare City. They put in 5, 6, 7 different kind of chemicals throughout the reverse osmosis process. And then the membranes themselves have to be changed out, the pre-filters and, yeah.
So what is this new medium or whatever you're using? Why wasn't that
It's a
thought of to
laptop.
begin with?
It's a lime softening, and it softens the water, it takes out some, other solids. The drawback to lime softening is that you need a huge footprint for it, because you gotta have your mixing tank, and then your settling tanks, and your clarifiers and all that stuff. It's fortunate that we have the space available to do that versus the cost of the RO, so it actually becomes cheaper running it that way. Because we do have the space, we do have the capability of doing it that way versus trying to shove everything into RO, and RO is usually used in a drinking water aspect, so you're taking wastewater with other dissolved materials and running it through that filter, which makes more problems for maintenance operation, add more chemicals, anticoagulants and all that other stuff, which raises that cost.
And when DFA seen the capital costs relating to the RO, they said, oh, maybe we don't need water quality that pure.
Well,
Maybe-
that was my question. How pure is the water compared to the two? It isn't what we, does it hit our goal? I guess we're not going to.
Yeah, it'll meet HCP's goal, it'll meet our effluent limits, for sure.
The wastewater facility won't even have to go through any of the,
Refinished.
any of the finished treatment for the Heartland water. That can actually discharge to the waters of the US. That water that goes to Heartland has to go through the next step of purification. And that's this lime softening plant that they're talking about.
Good questions. Any other questions about rates? I think one thing that I was gonna talk about is, you know, when we did take our reserve account from 10 to 3, there was a lot of conversation and talk, and that pre-treatment from DFA also contributed a lot to not having to have it so high. That pre-treatment took a lot off the actual wastewater district.
And then I think as our technical committee, Michael and Oma and Al and myself, we also talked about the capital investment that's gonna be going into the part of the facility that further purifies the water for Heartland. Makes that water have a value. So we're gonna have to determine the value of that water as a sellable product to Heartland. granted, for Heartland to accept that, it can't be an enormous price when they can pump it out of the ground pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So we still have to come to something there so that we're not putting in capital money and giving them water free. So that's also been one of our
Yeah,
discussions.
that isn't in our formula, and I was just
No.
gonna talk
Yeah.
about that, is that the other thing, the other output that this wastewater facility has that almost none of the other wastewater facilities in Minnesota have is we are putting water reuse in. One for Heartland, but they can't actually use all the water. Right? So where's the rest of that water gonna go? I don't know. There could be new data centers that pop up, new industries that pop up. There's literally water trains right now running water to California. You know what they get for a gallon of water on the water trains? $1.10 a gallon. So-
And that's potable water, or is that just,
It's
Treated?
clean enough to do agra with it.
Agriculture, yeah.
You can spread it in a
looking for
field.
some, or
What?
are they still looking for some?
Everyone.
Every train, yeah.
We're continuously in drought
I
season.
think we would rather grab somebody's attention when it comes to a data center because they're
Yep,
talking about one in Rosemont, Minnesota. They're talking about one now in Becker, Minnesota. And I think Uma said in each area of the state, they have different benefit that they're looking for.
Right.
And one of the benefits they're looking for in outstate is reuse water. They use a lot of water. They could use 300,000 gallons a day. That's water that could go to them.
Mhm.
Yes. It's all cooling. It's all
Yeah.
cooling.
Yeah,
But then when that water comes back, it's not dirty.
right.
So it can bypass the wastewater plant
And go
and mix
right out.
with the effluent part of the wastewater plant and send it back to them. So that's one of the keys in this project is the word reuse to grab people's attention.
Right.
And Michael and Uma were involved with the DNR roundtable in reference to that
Yeah,
part of the discussion.
and that went extremely well. I mean, we've gotten a lot of feedback. That's, I think, honestly, how we got on MPCA's jump list. They were like, I don't know, we were talking one day and Bill Dunn, the front charge of MPCA, just called us and said, we heard you building a wastewater facility. We want to know more about it.
Well, how much excess water will this?
About 400,000 gallons a
About
day.
400,000.
Yeah, Heartland will take about 100 dish.
And some days we could have over 800,000 gallons coming to this wastewater facility.
Yeah,
And the vast majority of that water will pipe to the waters of the US. So whatever can be interrupted and can affordably be cleaned. You know, the portion of the facility that they would put in for the reuse now for HCP. There again, it's capital costs. We could make that so it would clean up 400, 500, 600,000 gallons a day. But that's capital costs that have to be investment. So there's a mixing point there of.
Yeah.
yeah, so within those
I was
rates,
trying to think, I thought it was some kind of man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
apparently font was not supported to do PDF. So I guess within those rates, Kelly, is why we were bringing the water reuse. The reason that we haven't brought that into the formula is because we don't know, 2 or 3 years down the road, once we start seeing the revenue based on water, that wastewater district might go back and say, we can actually reduce the amount of rates to our constituents. That base fee can go to $10 because we're making a couple million, now. So
By selling the.
by selling the water. So there are some magic numbers floating around with that we could actually reduce those rates a little bit further. I mean, we couldn't right away because we don't know what that's gonna mean. But there's a number in that formula, there's a factor in there that we haven't figured out yet until, we reach an agreement with DFA.
That number could have reduced the $27 per account and the $12 per thousand.
Absolutely.
But for us to assume and put that in there
Right.
You just
to
can't.
lower it's just not right at this point.
Yeah, and it just, you'd have to run it for a couple years in order to make that.
It's nice to lower it and not have to raise it longer at this part of the game.
Yeah.
So, and the other reason is that reuse facility is the district's facility. It's not Heartland's facility, so that's why they're not paying any capital costs. So, if somebody else decides to move into the area and wants to use our reuse facility, for additional production for whatever they want to use it for. We're not in constrained to the government foreign products that they're telling us, you know, we built it and own it.
Right.
That was the other reason for trying to move into industries to a user agreement type deal versus capital improvement.
Heartland has two sources of water now. They get water from the city of Winthrop. And they have a well over by Gaylord where they pump, I think they said in excess of 500,000 gallons a day over. And they have a lot of capacity over there, pumping wise, but they don't have a lot of capacity permit wise. And the state is protective of its water underground. And they know that they're not gonna be able to pump a lot more water out of there. They're constantly doing reuse and recycling within their facility. I can remember a year ago when we were looking at numbers and we got an email from Heartland Corn and they said, by the way, they said, reduce our use by 100,000 gallons. We found another process inside that we can recycle and return. So they're constantly doing that as part of their operations, but I think for their growth pattern, they always want to have the ability to
Expand.
get other water.
Are there any solids or waste after it's been, okay,
Yep.
that was,
Yep, there definitely are, and they'll be mostly land applied or agri applied.
One of the byproducts of a wastewater facility is what they call sludge or agricultural biosolids. It's high in nutrients. And that can be dried down to reduce it further down from a liquid level. And then it's land applied according to the crops that are in the field. The corn crop uses up so much nitrogen each year on its growing season, so you can put down so many ton per acre. And so it's used as agricultural fertilizer.
and the plant will get it to that point so they can?
Oh, yeah, we have to,
Okay.
yeah,
Yep. We either have to contract it out or do it on our own. Like
and that was,
Arlington applies their own and New Ulm applies their own.
that, $325,000 per year, that is for the solids that the plant's gonna make. For the operating costs.
You know, and to prove how that number is another safety net for us. Over at Michael's Foods and Gaylor's, they're spending about $75,000 a year for solids handling on a 500,000 gallon acres per facility. So if you would do the multiplication, their budget would probably be about 150 to 200,000 gallons annually. Here we budgeted 324. We wanted to make sure we're not lowballing numbers to get the budget down to make it look good and then afterwards have to come back.
Absolutely.
That doesn't get sold farmers, does it? And-
Down in the cities, down in Minneapolis, they actually take it and they mix it with the lime from water plants.
Okay,
And then it becomes a pH adjustment and they sell it as Nutrilime. And they haul it out to the outstates and they sell their biosolids mixed with the with the lime
Yeah.
from the water plants as a product called Nutrilime. Some of them sell it, some of them just charge trucking fees. It's the only negative that it is to a farmer is compaction.
oh,
It hurts your crop. So that's why you do it in spring or fall, preferably only in fall, so it has all winter to go through the cycle to loosen the soil back up. But their value is you can give them sometimes in Gaylord, I know at the Michael's Foods facility, they can take 220 acres and they can give it enough fertilizer to cover all of the nitrogen needs for growing a corn crop in an annual season. So those are man-made crops or man-made fertilizers that they don't have to buy.
I don't know why the dates, so the project priority list, we did already submit for 2025. That's the PPL. That gives the MPCA kind of a, hey, just so you know, we really are gonna need funding down the road. It also scores us based on our needs and based on the score. Again, regionalization scores higher, for the 4 towns, so, we hope to get those scores back in the end of March, the end of this month. They kind of they actually walked through almost all of the application with us. So MPCA is really behind regionalization and, you know, they, like everyone, want to see 1 permit, not 7 or 6. I don't know what that date was, but it was important.
You also know, so the first box is March 2025, which is
Done.
basically March 7th.
Yes.
We already did something. And then second one is February 2026.
So that's when our facility plan has to be completed if we want to move forward. And obviously, there's a financial obligation for each of the cities when it comes to that.
And then the last one is June 2026.
And so that is the more important one, because that's when MPCA actually approves the project to go forward. And that's when we're gonna see funding mechanisms, that's when we're gonna figure out the grant. That's where that really comes into play. I don't know why I did that. I don't know. So that's our project timeline. You know, we always try to give you guys an update. This is a marathon, not a sprint. These permits and the facility plan and the approval for grants, it just takes time. The funding cycles are only so many times per year, and we have to get those applications in. So this is kind of our tentative schedule right now. And we bumped this up against what MPCA kind of gave us feedback on our timeline during the call. And they just said, you need to push that back, or you need to move that forward. Hey, you need to have that application done before you do X, Y, and Z. So that just gives you kind of an idea that, you know, in the next 5 years, this is gonna take some time to get through. So these are the estimated costs and our commitments to move forward. So I will tell you that individually, if you were gonna go build your own wastewater facility, these estimated costs are almost the exact same. The nature of what we're doing is just really expensive. I don't know what to tell you. So just for the facility plan, you know, it's $1 million. Permitting, with all the state permitting, it's $250 to $350. And then the environmental review, it has a really big gap because we really don't know what that's gonna be until they give us the effluents and all the other information that they're gonna want. We also have, on the permitting side, I just wanted to say that the permitting side, for conveyance is gonna be a large expense, right? So every time you dig in an unknown area, we have to make sure there's no dinosaur bones or anything important. So that is gonna be significant. So our next step in our planning is going to be another financial commitment. So we don't need answers right now today. We have to put some packages together for you to say, the next steps are going to require this amount of money from each one of the cities. The great thing is this DFA and Heartland, I spoke to both of them. They don't want their contribution back. So we're not refunding anyone from the initial $25,000 investment. They agree with the project. They understand it needs to go forward. Both of them want it. They just didn't want all that capital upfront costs, which in the long term, honestly, could really help us pay down the debt faster. So those numbers are scary to me, and I think everyone in the room. They're going to cost money. So that next step, you know, we're talking about almost $1 million between all of us. The good thing is on the backside of this, it is refundable with the loan from the state. So they can wrap that amount of money into the loan to help pay the cities back after the project is completed. But again, that project plan and startup is not until 2030. So you'd have to figure out how to pay for it. We've asked, UMA has gone on the line and asked multiple times to MPCA and Rural Development about, hey, is there any grant money available for the project plan or the construction plan? And no, there's nothing. And I don't know why that is. I don't even.
USDA rural development will give a little bit.
A little bit.
I think it's like 25,000.
Yeah.
But they also said, NPCA said, if you're going towards this route, don't go to USDA.
Yes. Yeah.
So
They said you got to kind of pick a track.
USDA operates really different. Their benefits aren't as great as the DFA.
Yeah.
They do take into account affordability. But the state itself in place has some other grant opportunities that will show up as you go through the process that won't in USDA. So that's, in a nutshell, the biggest difference between.
I know when Michael and I were down at the Capitol for money for New Auburn, there was it was one of the northern Minnesota, one of the Iron Range towns, and they were in there asking for money, and I think it was $500,000 or $600,000 for a preliminary engineering study plan. But we know how the Capitol works, and we know what their cycles are. You know, if you don't get in now, then you don't get in there for another year. So that's another thing to work with legislators and see if we can get them to write a bill for that. But it'd be tough to get it in this year.
I don't know if they're gonna complete much of anything this year. And there's also an opportunity, so myself and Uma are actually flying to Washington DC at the beginning of April. It's called the Water Flying. American Water Association Flying. Okay, I got it half right. And then we're gonna meet with all our senators and representatives during that meeting. We're gonna leave page behinds and say, you know, help rural Minnesota. This is not only an economic development project, but an environmental one, so it helps everyone calm the waters. And appeals to both sides. So, we can hopefully get some funding from that as well.
So how much are we looking at, coming up with in the next step?
Uma, what 750 was our estimate.
That would be split amongst.
It would be split amongst the 4 communities. But again, we have to make sure that the number is accurate. That's why it's really wasn't in the slide tonight, but we're working on that. And some of that we'll work on this next month.
Divided by 4 or divided by the
Population.
population?
No, divided by 4, just like we did the rates.
Does that all have to be budgeted for, say, 2026, or can you spread it out over?
That's what we really have to figure out is if we can do it in phases.
Yeah.
And how that impacts the enterprise funds from each city, because we're all at different spots. You know, New Auburn has been spending money, a lot of money on figuring out what their wastewater facility looks like. And, you know, Lafayette has also spent money on trying to figure out what a new mechanical plant looks like. I can tell you that there is a town north and east of here that just got their preliminary estimates back for a new wastewater facility to pick up and move their whole wastewater facility. $65 million for one facility.
Town population 3,300.
Oh, no.
We'd love to have 30 million of that and have them pump that water over here.
Yeah. They are interested, but we're gonna cross that bridge later.
Yeah.
Because we are too far down the road right now.
The one thing I think we heard at that webinar today, a regionalization webinar, is what, and not to diminish from the engineering side of it. They said the easy part of this is the engineering. They said the hard part is the political, funding, and the organization.
Yeah.
Where was I? Okay. Pause. So these are kind of what the 4 of us, the technical team, I guess, are really working on next steps. If we plan to go forward with wastewater facility, we need a facility plan. That is, any other application that we fill out from here on out, we are going to need a facility plan. We're gonna also pursue other funding. That's why we're going to Washington DC. That's why we went up to the Capitol and doing leave behinds. Fishbach was here 2-3 weeks ago. And Winthrop put a pamphlet together that not only talked about ambulance funding and fire funding, but it had 2 pages of the wastewater funding saying, we need help. Help us. This is a good thing. Legal work. So Daniel actually couldn't make it this evening, although he wanted to. And he will be at the next meeting because we're really going to focus on what it takes to form a district. On the call today, they said, well, there's 100 ways you can do it. But, you know, it's what's right for our communities, and what what we'll do.
And that's one thing the MPCA keeps asking, what is your structure?
Where's your structure? Who's gonna be in charge? Like the one today, the city actually, no, the county owned the facility, but then they had a board running it.
Yep.
And representatives from each one of
And
them.
on one of the projects, the city was the sponsor of all of the debt and funding because one municipality had to be the key resource.
Yeah. And so that is different than a wastewater district, because a wastewater district has the ability to bond. And that's kind of what Daniel will go over next week.
What do they want to see?
MPCA?
Yeah.
They don't care, as long as we pick a direction and figure it out.
I think the attorney has really led towards a district.
I will tell you that the district will be much easier. And it's a solidified legal entity that then has to have representation on it from each community. And how we write those bylaws will be really important, I think, just so that all the towns can get along, make sure that they set the rate structure each year. You know, they'll be in charge of employees, right? Because they'll be like city councils.
So was that factored into the cost of running it? I mean, you're gonna have that million, I think you had 1,070,000, that was for employees.
Yep.
Operating the plant and the administrative part also?
Yes, correct.
There's enough in there for about 10 employees and
Only 10.
it wouldn't be 24/7 operation. Right now, it might be, we're thinking 7 to 10 employees. One of them could possibly be an administrative director.
Okay.
Does payroll on the side. Maybe you can get a good lead operator that is a very good administrative director. And you can have good operators underneath them. So it's all that structure would all work out.
Or you might find a leader that really doesn't want to deal with the admin side, and then you're gonna have to build in a utility
Yeah.
clerk or administrator that builds out the cities, does all the meetings, whatever that might look like. So those are really the 4 key points that we're gonna work on the next couple months. I know that night meetings are not fun, I get it, but we will probably call another meeting in May-ish. I know that's busy for everyone, and we'll try to make it in the middle of the week like this one. That one will probably come with an ask about how much money the facility plan is going to cost. We'll also kind of tell you what happened in April when we went to DC. And hopefully Daniel has some more news from us for the legal side of things.
And this, for the people who haven't met Daniel, he's
Oh, yeah, I should
worked
probably
for
say
a firm and
something.
he specializes in structuring these kind of deals and legalities and districts and joint powers and.
He works for Flattery and Hood up in the Twin Cities. They're a lobbying and a legal firm. And they do a great job at making sure their people are represented. And he doesn't like to waste money, which is really great. He's like, I mean, I could come to you, but you're just gonna blab about rate structures, you don't really need me, so why waste the money? So. Any other questions? Any slides that you guys wanna go back to? Don, I almost have you out of here in an hour. I'm just letting you know.
That's okay. I'll just miss my next meeting.
I think that, getting it to about 100 million, it was a really big goal, I think, for all of us after the December meeting. And I think the other thing is like, we're still progressing forward, we're not stuck in the mud. I think the industrial partners were really happy. They would rather pay higher rates monthly. It's easier for them to go to a board of directors and say, hey, by the way, our rates are gonna change. We don't need $10 million, but our rates are gonna change, and someone else is gonna deal with our wastewater. Hallelujah. So those were really big hurdles. I know we went over it really fast, but those were really big sticking points.
Industry's board of directors do not like to deal with capital approvals because it has to go out to their stockholders.
Yeah.
But they will budget millions of dollars for operations on annual budgets.
Yeah. Any questions about the rate? Any feelings about the rates? Are they more reasonable? We thought they were way more reasonable than what we gave you before.
So is this on top of the regular water? Is this in place of the water on our utility bill or is it in addition
Wastewater
to
of your sewer,
the sewer?
the
Okay,
sewer portion of your bill.
Okay.
You'll still have a clean water.
Yeah.
Right.
okay.
And then if you got some debt for your specific community on the sewer side, that could be thrown onto the base charge of 27. Maybe there's another $3 a month per account. Whatever that number would be to cover that other city debt on a street project that involves sewer.
And there's things that we as a city still have to do, right? We still have to maintain our sewer system.
Yep.
We still have to make sure that if, something collapses, we're fixing it. So there's gonna have to be another reserve account on top of this, but it will be significantly less than trying to build our own facility.
We still have a treatment plant, for drinking water.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Which if most of the towns will tell you around here, also needs to be replaced in the next 20 years. So that'll be our next hurdle, Kelly. Please don't go ahead. We're only dealing with wastewater right now.
And when you look at these large capital costs where you have to come up with, money, the one that Michael was referring to, and the operator actually called me about 2 hours ago and told me about it. The reason they're looking at $65 million for a community of 3,300 people is because the state came in and changed their permit. Like Al's looking at 28 million, they changed the permit. Gibbon or Winthrop or New Albany can say, well, that's not our concern right now because our permits are fine. But when the permit does change, then you're in the boat of 28 million for Lafayette or 60 million for this other project. And that's where most of these prices on these projects are getting driven by is the state changing the permit requirements.
Remember, cars are changing and pond systems are no longer immune to the ongoing changes. They're enforcing it on everybody.
Do they have like an arsenic problem or PFAS or
Some,
something?
yeah, that one did, they had an arsenic problem there. The other advantage to regional thing, one facility has a high concentration of something, and the other facilities don't. Of course, there's a dilution factor that could bring that number back down to being more manageable and not any prohibition put on that because of that limit or because of that. We were able to achieve that in one of the districts. One city had a high arsenic content in drinking water. They removed it, of course, going to the wastewater facility. And then when they did the regional facility, that level dropped down so low that it didn't matter how it was handled and usage with the biosolids and everything.
Any other questions, thoughts, anything that you need for next meeting? When we meet? Does 7 PM work for everyone? Do you want to meet earlier? Want to meet later? I figure that gives you enough time to go home, throw food at kids, or do whatever you need to do. Okay. Well, we'll see you again. Again, I'll email it out. We'll put this on our Facebook, our YouTube channel, so that you can go back and watch it as well. And I'll send the administrators all the actual PowerPoints so you can have not weird Greek letters. For the city administrators too, we do have the feasibility study. Bound from Killing Horn, thank you, Uma. I think we made 3 for each city.
Yeah, 3 groups.
So if you want to take one on your way out, Given, if you want to grab one for the Dana.
Who's all represented here tonight?
Given.
For Lafayette back here.